Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about objectives and what is an objective. I see these YouTube videos and I see these people talking about objectives and trying to explain what an objective is, and they'll say that you can measure it by a percentage of how many they get right, 70 out of 100 or 7 out of 10 or whatever they say, but that to me that's not an objective, because if you've gone to college and you've looked at the syllabus, then you know that the syllabus of a university includes what the objectives are, and never have I ever read in any of those objectives that they're measurable by tests. And if you're homeschooling, you don't want objectives that are focused on test scores anyway. So I just wanted to show you that since the 1920s even, that education has always aimed at objectives, explained Bobbit in 1922. That included both academic knowledge and required life skills. So hopefully that will help you, and we're just going to go through this, and because this has been around for a long time, and this talks about the 1924. Bobbit defines and his definition is important. It's important. He wrote these books on education, and I really believe that his opinion is important when you look at it. But he defines education as a process of growing up in the right way, while the objectives are the goals of growth. The pupils' activities and experiences, pupils' activities and experience are the steps which make up his journey toward those goals. The activities and experience are the curriculum. So, and then he had a book in 1918 as well, so that this has been around for a long time, that these objectives have been defined to where it's supposed to include life skills. So it's not just what are you teaching them, what kind of knowledge that they're going to have, but it's how are they going to be able to use this knowledge and life skills. And I have too many tabs open, as you can see, but this one is also from Bobbit. So you can see 1918, Franklin Bobbit published the curriculum, which many consider to be the birth of the scientific field of curriculum. He criticized traditional curriculum and advocated that a curriculum employ the scientific method and outline what was important in each subject for students to learn, and then to develop objectives and activities for educators to use, even though he stated that objectives were already around. And many people disagree because they feel like when you're so focused on what the objectives are, that you lose what the students could have learned without the objectives. Maybe they could have learned all these other things that you hadn't realized, because you may not realize those things. So in Bobbitt's follow-up book, How to Make Your Curriculum 1920, he set the following guidelines for the curriculum development. Eliminate objectives that are impractical and cannot be accomplished. Emphasize objectives that are needed for adult living. Avoid objectives that are opposed by the community. Involve the community in setting the objectives. Differentiate objectives for all, for some. So it talks about what objectives are, but this is since the 1920s. They were supposed to include life skills. And then this is something you may not know, because it talks about behavioral and non-behavioral objectives, and that and you can see in my website that I'm at on the upper left-hand corner if you want to type it in. But it talks so that you need to know that there are both behavioral and non-behavioral objectives. So that this might help you to realize that. And you can pause this and read some of this if you want right here. But I just want you to know that and to understand that. I may not agree with all the websites and their wording, but it's like the best I could find. But this talks about behavioral objectives are well-defined and clear cut. They are simple behaviors and skills that the teacher wants the students to learn. These are very measurable and can be observed easily. And here comes the ad, so it might make my voice start cutting out. An example, but you can read it. A behavioral objective would be the ability to perform acid-base reactions in a chemistry class. A non-behavioral objective are the skills that are more difficult to observe or measure because they're not outward behaviors, they're in their mindset. for instance, in that same chemistry class, the ability to follow the scientific method. So then we go to the next website. And these types of objectives have okay, that's not where I'm supposed to be. Let me scroll up. There we go. Okay, different kinds of objectives are more artistic way of teaching. A non-behavioral objective. Few teachers are taught that there is a class of non-behavioral objectives. These may use more general terms. Read what it states, but anyway, there's problem-solving objectives and expressive activities that lead to expressive outcomes. So, non-behavioral objectives would be such as to know, to understand, to learn, or to appreciate. And some people call those vague objectives, but those are non-behavioral objectives, so that you know there's two kinds of objectives. One is non-behavioral and one is behavioral. And it's better that you have this understanding. So if you're talking to somebody else and they're trying to say, hey, that's vague, no, this is a non-behavioral objective. And they're both important. And this paper argues that both behavioral and non-behavioral objectives are valuable and necessary in curriculum design. So, and here's another website. And like I said, you can see where I'm at in the upper left-hand corner. I don't want to scroll to the top of every page because I have so many tabs open that I'm having a hard time pulling them up. But this one talks about behavioral objectives and non-behavioral objectives. So it says there is considerable controversy today. This is 1977, concerning the inappropriateness of specifying educational goals in behavioral terms. The debate tends to be characterized by, I don't know what that word is. The literature largely suggests that it is a case of either behavioral or non-behavioral objectives. It is demonstrated that, in fact, both kinds of objectives are valuable and necessary in curriculum design, and that the long-range goals of any curriculum defines the kinds of objective statements, behavioral and non-behavioral, that are required. It should not be a question of either or, but rather under what conditions are one or the other kind of objective statements appropriate. And I had contacted you know when you're homeschooling and they have these different places that you can go through, and one of them was focused more on public school, and I went to ask them questions, and I was asking them if it listed their objectives on their webpage, and the chat person said they didn't even know what an objective was. They didn't know what I meant by an objective. They had never heard anything. They had never heard of an objective, and they're like, oh, you know, do you mean this or that? And I couldn't believe they didn't know what an objective was. Then I watch these YouTube videos of people trying to explain what an objective is, and a lot of them, it seems like they don't know what it is, even though they're trying to explain it. So, and this is writing behavioral objectives. Please use this tool, okay? What is it behavioral objectives are? Behavioral objectives describe what the participant will be able to do after having attended your activity, something that is observable and measurable. And so then it gives you this list of verbs. So, and it says what behavioral objectives are not. Verbs that describe feelings, emotions, thoughts, or similar things are not behavioral because they are not observable or measurable. But a lot of times you'll see places that use those terms, and they feel that that's, you know. So this one says these are examples. This is a university, Carnegie Mellon University, and they have their objectives. It talks about upon successful completion of this course, you should be able to. So you should be able to perform simple calculations. So communicate orally and in writing, draw informed conclusions. But it talks about what they're. So these are some objectives. So that's why I opened this, because they had objectives. Describe broad trends in energy use over time. And I'm going away from this one now. And this one's from DePaul. And it talks about objectives and learning outcomes. Learning outcomes are specific statements of what students will be able to do when they successfully complete a learning experience. So, and you can go here to read about what learning outcomes are and the elements of effective. And you could pause it to read it as well so that students know what's expected of them. And that's, when you're designing a course, if you've gone to college, you'll see that a syllabus usually has the name of the course, the professor's name, the office number, hours, contact information, um, if you need to purchase any books or you have access to any software, it should be listed as well. So what you can know what you need to prepare for the class. If you need a notebook, a calculator, a certain amount of lab hours, it should be listed as well. It should tell you the times, the locations of the class, how many credits, the times the classes meet, when your class assignments are due, possibly a list of assignments that are due, upcoming test dates, how are you being graded, any web links needed, rules of the classroom, objectives, and any expectations of the teacher. The syllabus may convey how many hours that the professor expects you to spend studying each week or working on assignments in order to learn the material, or how many hours they believe are required for you to study or work in order to learn all the information. Even though people differ, they may have allotted points that you can acquire for each assignment in a way so that you will understand which assignments are worth the most points and what is expected of you, what constitutes as an excuse absence, how many absences are permitted, being tardy, and the consequences where your students should check online maybe for any changes, updates, announcements. If you miss a day, the teacher may require you to attend something to make up for it. Maybe like an English professor may want you to attend a poetry reading, and there might be a sign-in sheet at the front. By reading the objectives and knowing what the student will learn and how they will be able to utilize the knowledge, the student will be able to know more about if the class meets their interests or not. So that's just something you should know. And if you're designing a class, maybe, does the way you're assessing the students let you know if they're learning the material? And how, if you're designing a sewing class, maybe your objectives may be to teach them how to safely use a sewing machine, how to thread the machine, how to use a variety of stitches, having projects as part of the lesson, such as making a pillow, a tote bag, a blue jean holder for notebooks and pencils, or pajamas that will show that they're able to use the knowledge in real world situations. So the objective may be, that this is what they're going to do in the class. If you're designing an art class, you may want to teach them a variety of arts and crafts, such as beading jewelry, making keychains, tie-dyeing, screen printing, t-shirts, painting, drawing, or other ways that shows that they're able to make gifts for others or even sell items at a craft fair. So your objective may be to teach them these skills and have them choose which skills are favorite so that they can design so many and take them to a craft fair. If you're designing a foreign language class, then you may want your students to learn songs that they're familiar with in English, and you may want them to learn how to sing those in the foreign language as well to help them be familiar with the foreign language. If you're designing a home ec class, that can include a lot of things. You could be covering cooking foods such as grilled cheese sandwiches, French toast, microwave baked potatoes with different toppings. You may want them to learn cooking terms. You may be teaching them about gardening with simple things such as taking the ends of foods off of onions or celery so that they can grow a continuous supply of food. You may be helping them come up with ways to create a meal plan for a week on a budget, shop on that budget, and help you with the meals. And that may be part of your objective. You may have a checklist of working with them to teach them life skills such as doing laundry, dusting, mopping, organizing, decorating, or other household chores so that they'll be able to take care of themselves when they're adults. You may have your students learn to do first aid for imaginary wounds. You may have sewing as one of their lessons. You may have a check in the oil, decide maybe making birdhouses so that they can learn how. So you can choose what your list of objectives are, and you may have certificates of achievement that you put in your portfolio or binder, but that helps you to understand what objectives are, because you may not want to create a list of objectives, but at least you might want to know what they are. If you're watching this video, obviously you're interested in what they are. So, and this website talks about students will compute lengths and areas of a classroom to create a blueprint of the classroom indicating the scale used. When finished, the students write a sales pitch to a person explaining why their blueprint is accurate and should be purchased. So, and this website also talks about creating objectives. And there seems to be, people seem to have, they don't, they don't seem to agree now on what an objective is. And this one, and I don't pronounce that word. I'm sorry, I have like, when I say the word, I feel like I need to go to speech class again. But I may not say it, I may not enunciate it correctly. A course objective specifies a behavior, skill, or action that a student can demonstrate if they have achieved mastery of the objective. As such, objectives need to be written in such a way that they are measurable by some sort of assessment. But this talks about objectives. And people get them confused, and it says you want to make sure that you have thought of a way to assess students' learning knowledge when writing course objectives. For example, see, I don't agree with the testing, but you want them to be able to use it in a real life skill. Since the 1920s. What do you want them? They're going to have knowledge. What do you want them to be able to do with that knowledge? Because that helps you when you're designing a class, when you want your students to learn. You want them to, if you're teaching them math, a lot of times, when you first start teaching them math, you can put the blanks in different spaces instead of always having the blank at the end. And you can teach them to add with pennies so that being able to add money and pay for things and check to make sure they have the right change is part of your objective in teaching them math so that they can have real life skills. So, and this talks about the difference between objectives and assessments. So, students should be, this talks about one thing that can be confusing when creating course objectives is the difference between what students are being asked to know and the assessment that is used to prove that students know the information. It may be tempting to write something like, if the students have learned U.S. history since 1865, they should be able to write an essay comparing the difference. But like it says here, this saying that by the end of the class, students should be able to write an essay. That makes it sound like the objectives of the course is for students to write an essay. What students really need to know, though, is the effect of immigration on American culture. So that would be the objectives. So, and this talks about Bloom's taxonomy, and I believe this was created in the 1950s. So, and you can find that online in all kinds of places. So, and let's go to the next website. And I just couldn't believe that I went to this place and this place cost money. This is one of those. I couldn't tell if it was homeschooling or more focused on public schools because it mentioned public schools and it mentioned home teachers. But when I went to chat with a person, I wasn't sure if they were a person or a bot because they couldn't answer my questions without being very vague and they didn't seem to understand the question. So then I tried to rephrase it, but they didn't know what an objective was. And so I thought, wow, I wonder how many other people don't know what it is. So, and this talks about learning objectives. This blending learning class is intended for anyone out of high school interested in learning how to sew. By the end of this class, you will have, and this is Sewing 101, a syllabus. So you see it's a syllabus. And in the syllabus, it has learning objectives. So, you might, one of the objectives is to have a finished project that is sewn by you, whether it's a pillow or a stuffed animal, pajamas, a tote bag, some blue jean purse, one of those blue jean things where you can put your notebook and pen and carry it around for drawing or whatever. Excuse me. An understanding of the history of sewing or how to use a sewing machine, like being able to safely use sewing equipment, feeling comfortable using sewing tools, and buying things needed, such as fabric and patterns, and knowing how to use a variety of stitches, applying buttons and closures, sewing in a few zippers, and you might want to be able to make sure they know how to use a pattern. But these are objectives with real life skills, and So I think that's important when you're creating a class, especially if you're homeschooling. To me, it seems like you want your students to have real life skills. And this is from the 1960s, and it talks about objectives of home economics. The objectives are to help students prepare themselves for home and family living, to provide certain experiences which are preparation for professional home economics employment. So I think that's kind of vague. But like I said, it's from the 1960s, but it shows objectives to provide the home economics education curricula which will qualify the person to meet requirements of Arizona. So, and this one says to provide course requirements for a dietitian. So you can see that home economics had objectives in the 1960s, but there's other objectives you'll find on the internet. And this one talks about objectives and attitudes. So pupils should be encouraged to develop positive attitudes towards themselves, their home, and their community, to develop a sense of safety and hygiene in the workroom, classroom, at home and in the community, to develop discernment and judgment in consumer matters, to develop an awareness of and sensitivity to differences between family units, to develop a sense of accuracy and attention to detail, to develop a sense of cooperation, flexibility, improvisation, responsibility, and tolerance in their attitudes. So these are, especially if you're homeschooling, you want your children to develop these types of attitudes. So you might come up with ways for them to do that, and that might be your objective. So you might say, oh, these are my objectives. How can I find something that helps them with those objectives? And it might be doing volunteer work. It might be, it might have to deal with donating things or I don't, it's just up to you how you come up with these ways, but that might be some of your objectives. And this talks about if on the completion, the pupils should know the following: why good health depends on eating a variety of foods, why there is a range of dietary needs among people, why current dietary advice should be considered. So these are their objectives, and they may not phrase them the way that you might would like, and it might be non-behavioral objectives. But like I said, sometimes it's important to have behavioral objectives, and sometimes it's important to use non-behavioral objectives because you want them to understand this. Why hygiene in relation to handling of food and personal well-being is important. Why safe and clean practices in the use of resources and procedures are important. How the management of personal expenditures on food depends on individual priorities. Why individuals have different priorities about values and living patterns in relation to food, how food is processed and preserved, how to plan, prepare, cook, and present food in order to meet the above needs. So these are a variety of objectives, and this helps you to understand, hopefully, what an objective is so that you can see that. Because I think it's important, and I hope that helps you to be able, if you have to create objectives where you're at or where you live. Some people say that you should do vague objectives if you're doing it for a public school. And they have lists of that on the internet. So, but there are similar objectives everywhere. And when someone creates learning objectives, they have the objectives for doing so. My objective for homeschooling might be so that my students learn at their own pace, do not sit idly listening to a teacher something that is beneath or above their level, to have more family time for them to be able to choose electives. And these are not learning objectives, but these are my objectives, and we have objectives. An objective might state that it will give you the opportunity to see the importance between learning how to do something and compare it to its usefulness in the real world. They might then provide examples of how learning the subject can help you in the real world, or how others have used it in the real world to help you have a clearer picture. If you create a software program and you want to show objectives of the software program, you will want to create objectives that make people want to use it. When colleges create learning objectives that make students want to take the course, to make them want to have that academic knowledge and those set of skills. Their objectives is to gain the students' interest, get students to take their course with an understanding of how that course can help them in their professional lives. And those aren't learning objectives, but they're still objectives. So you want to make sure that the course is something that is focused on the students' learning goals and their interests. Um, if someone's teaching PE, do they simply want the students to keep moving, active, and healthier? Do they want to teach the students a variety of fun and interesting ways to stay active that the students can use in the real world to stay fit throughout their lives and not just while taking the course, such as bowling, swimming, hiking, dancing? Understanding what objectives are and how to use them is not just something you can use during homeschooling, but you create objectives when you're teaching a course to adults. And you may want to be able to create objectives in the workplace as a way of communicating why someone would want to do something and how it will benefit others. So objectives are not just used in homeschooling, they're used all over the place. There's more than educational objectives, but it's important to know what they are. Understanding and being able to use objectives may help you be able to stick to the point while getting your point across in a way that others understand your point and the benefits of it to people with different levels of understanding. This is an excellent communication skill and a career skill to have. When students attend public school and they learn math, they say things like, how am I ever going to use this after I leave? They may not consider that certain math skills will help them be able to know what size furniture will fit in their room. They may not consider that they may want to add a room on. They may not, they may want to be able to design and build furniture later, and they're going to need these math skills. So if you want to have chickens for eggs someday, and they may want to design and build a chicken coop with plumbing so that they don't have to water them every day. So it's just important for, to have the objectives. So, and I don't know if I'm starting to ramble on, but you might want to teach them a variety of electives so that they have a variety of skills for both the workforce as entrepreneurs and even to have hobbies throughout their lives that may even help to make them money. If you understand as a homeschool teacher the benefits of learning the variety of subjects and how learning them can benefit your children throughout their lives, then you can convey this to your children, and then maybe they will be more interested in learning. Perhaps you can even ask your students if they can come up with ideas and reasons for the course so that they have to stop and think how it might help them so that they have a deeper understanding. So, anyway, I'm hoping this helps. Career-oriented field trips might help you. You might have certain objectives for your students, and you might want them to learn different things, and you might want to utilize the career-oriented field trips as part of your educational goals. Anyway, I hope that helps you to understand what objectives are. So, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and please feel free to leave comments. Thank you so much for tuning in to my channel. Have a great day. Bye-bye.